Good afternoon. It is 2 o'clock. I am late as usual. Mostly because I can't tell time, I guess. Um, Thank you for that thumbs up. I was just getting a little nervous about that. It is 59 degrees where I am. It's something for December. That's a nice weather pattern. So, now they got my internal clock working, I guess we say. We're going to talk a little sex trafficking, and it does apply to children. It does apply to adults, male or female. And it's New Year's Eve. And that is a prime time for someone to take advantage of people. Maybe not children, but we don't know that. Definitely adults take advantage of the adults out, possibly drinking and not in their right mind. Some guys helping some girls, as they say. So I would hope that everybody would buddy up tonight. It doesn't matter if you're a guy or a girl, buddy up and stay buddied up. Um, the fun you have is not worth losing somebody and never finding out till the next day. So take your time, party safely, take care of each other, and everybody get home safely. The FBI found 200 sex trafficking victims and more than 125 suspects in a 2-week child exploitation operation this past July. That's a lot of people. Was a summer month though. They called it Operation Cross Country. Wow, that's a loud motorcycle outside. Yeah, Operation Cross Country. The FBI located 59 victims of child sex trafficking and child sexual exploitation and 59 missing children. The FBI teamed up with state and local agencies to identify and arrest 126. Let me say that again. Identified or arrested 126 suspects of child exploitation and human trafficking, and 68 suspected traffickers. These people are everywhere. And they're not in the nook and crannies like it used to be. They used to be afraid, and they're not afraid anymore. They're not afraid at all. They're right out in the open. They're right out in the open because they're hiding in plain sight. Sex traffickers exploit and endanger some of the most vulnerable members of our society, the children, and what they cause their victims unimaginable harm. The operation put out by Attorney General Merrick B. Garland said the operation located 59 actively missing children builds on the tremendous work the FBI has undertaken for unspeakable crimes against minor victims. Behind every statistic, there is a person with dreams, aspirations, and the right to have a life free from child sex trafficking and exploitation. As a society, we must work together to ensure the protection, support, and empowerment of those impacted by the heinous crime. Sex trafficking is a a pervasive and underreported crime, and one of the most complex forms of child exploitation. Significantly, trafficked children who are predominantly between the ages 14 and 17. Pay close attention to your children in that age range. They're advertised and presented as adults and often appear to be adults and are often trained by traffickers to lie about their age to buyers and law enforcement. Under federal criminal law, child sex trafficking, and also referred to as domestic minor sex trafficking, commercial sex exploitation of minors, or even inappropriately the prostitution of children, is defined as recruiting, enticing, harboring, transporting, providing, obtaining, advertising, maintaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a person under 18. Knowing and recklessly disregarding that the person is minor and under 18, and that the person will be caused to engage in a commercial sex act. So you ask yourself, what is a commercial sex act? Well, it's a sex act on account of which anything of value is given to or received by a person, and is not limited to financial transactions. Child sex trafficking thus encompasses not only situations where the child or the trafficker receives payment for the sex act, but also those where there is no identified tracker, and a buyer directly solicits sex with the child in exchange for food, shelter, clothing, drugs, or other items of value. The law also criminalizes knowing benefiting financially and by receiving anything of value. These children are being traded like the commodities of the world. You give money for food, you get food. If you don't have anything, in the olden days of trading, you used to trade a chicken for some merchant. And I'm not saying that today it is, but how do you know? It may sound funny, but I'm not being funny. How do you know a kid hasn't been traded in another country because of a chicken, a piece of clothes, a drug, maybe some food? That's what I'm saying. Anything other, but it has value. In contrast to sex trafficking of adults, sex trafficking does not require the use of threat of force, fraud, or coercion. Although traffickers and buyers often use such tactics with children, if the victim is a minor and the offender knew and recklessly disregarded the fact that the minor would be engaged in a commercial sex act, then the offender engaged the victim in child sex trafficking. If the offender has a reasonable opportunity to observe the victim, which is often the case, then there's no need to prove knowledge or reckless disregard of the minor's status. Here's a few facts about sex trafficking. Children who run away or are abandoned are common targets. A history of trauma can make a child more vulnerable to the manipulative tactics of a trafficker. The majority of sex trafficked youth experience severe neglect. Traffickers use force and coercion to manipulate their victims. And this includes girls, boys, and transgender youth who are all at risk for sex trafficking. Let's check out some numbers. See, while it's very difficult for people to determine the true volume of child sex trafficking, research has helped to shed a light on the dynamics of these crimes taking place in the United States. In the United States, according to one study from 2010 to 2015, 1,400 individuals were arrested at the federal, state, and local levels on a specific charge of sex trafficking a minor, with an increasing number arrested each year. The research team identified sex trafficking arrests in every state except for Alaska, Hawaii, West Virginia, and Wyoming. What are they doing in their states? That's what I want to know. I want to know what they're doing in those states. Because they don't have sex trafficking arrests there. From 2010 to 2015, a good 5 years. The average age of traffickers in federal prosecution was 28.5 years old. Roughly 3/4 of them were male, but nearly every single one of them was a U.S. citizen. So while they're saying, oh, they're coming from another country and stealing our children, no, they're here. They're from here. We're talking about U.S. citizens. We're talking about apple pie, all American. Federal prosecutors of child-only sex trafficking cases increased from 17% from 2019 to 2020. And children made up 69% of victims in newly charged sex trafficking cases in 2020. It's just getting bigger. It's getting bigger. Looking at trafficking cases prosecuted in 2020, just over half the victims were children. The victims' ages were from 4 years old to 17 years old. I'm going to say that again because I don't think you're listening. The ages were from 4 years old to 17 years old when they were exploited, with the average age of being 15. 89% of child victims in active sex trafficking cases were between 14 to 17. And the worst part is 45.1% of victims knew their trafficker prior to becoming a victim. Let that sink in. Everything I'm saying is disgusting. It should not sit well in your stomach. Everyone should want to do something. No, everyone cannot tackle people to the ground and grab them, and that's not what you need. What you need are the eyes and the ears to be working on a swivel at all times. Whenever you go out, it happened to me. I was at the grocery store in the parking lot, sitting there. There's a truck on the next line parked in front of me at an angle. Wasn't thinking nothing of it. It's a car. Who cares? But he opened the back door to his truck. And I saw in a flash what I saw to be hands pop out like if they were laying on the floor, put together and reaching and trying to grab this person. And in a split second, he pushed the arms back in and shut the door. There's a lady on the passenger side, and this guy just goes in the store. Now, let me tell you this right now. This truck is parked at this store that he is not even 5 minutes away from the major interstate headed toward Texas. It is nothing to get on this interstate. He just has to pull out the parking lot, take a left, go 5 minutes up the road, take a right, and get on the interstate. That is it. That is how long it will take him. Did I doubt what I saw? Yeah. Did I think something wasn't right? Yeah. And it didn't sit well in my stomach because I know that thing. You don't want to get involved. You think you see things. You're like, oh, if I turn him in, or if I go get the cop that's standing right over there, because the grocery store where we're at has security from the police department. You don't know what to do. Embarrass yourself. Go tell on what you saw. Maybe cause a problem. Maybe cause a fight. Maybe there's a lot of things. But that day I failed. I wasn't sure what I saw. But I was sure about those hands. But I wasn't sure if it wasn't just their kid because the windows were so tinted. They were so calm in pushing those hands back. And there was a woman in the vehicle, so I thought maybe it was a wife or a girlfriend staying in the truck with the guy's kids or their kids if they were married. And he was going in the store to get something. And I watched the whole time. I couldn't take my eyes off him. I watched the truck to see if I saw anything else that stuck out, and I was going to go tell. But nothing else stuck out. When the man came out, they went right toward the interstate like I was scared they would. So I failed. See, traffickers include those who recruit, control, and sell children for sex to others, those who pay for sex with the child, and those who facilitate the crime, such as online advertisers, owners of the hotels and motels where the commercial sex takes place, and drivers who transport victims. And that's what I think I saw that day. Driver who is transporting a victim. Third parties are not always involved in child sex trafficking. Some child sex trafficking victims, such as those engaging in sex survival, commercial sex engaged in by the child who sees it as the only means to find money for food or shelter. Many interact directly and exclusively with the person providing items of value to them. The visual of that, what I saw, haunts me every day because I failed. I should have told. I should have went and got the cops. But I thought it was wrong because the woman was in the truck. And I thought it were their kids. But right or wrong, next time, I won't let it go. Children may be sold for sex by their own family members. In fact, counter trafficking data corroborates that the first data bait portal to include human trafficking cases contributed to many agencies found that based on global data analyzed, family members are involved in 36% of child sex trafficking cases. Familial trafficking often includes younger victims, and exploitation can take place through advertising the child online, making the child available through organized sex abuse rings, through individual contacts. A family member's motivation may be for money, drugs, production of child sex abuse material, intergenerational trauma. But you gotta understand, sex trafficking occurs everywhere. It happens in rural, in urban, in tribal areas, and impacts all children of all races and social economic status. It affects all genders, it affects all ages and sexual orientation. How evidence suggests that children of color, LGBTQI plus children, and children from lower income families and communities are disappropriately affected. See, with social media the way it is, offenders have an easier access to victims with whom they would not otherwise come in contact with. Children are recruited into child sex trafficking by their peers at school, lured in by young adults who are both victims and in the trafficking organization, and they're groomed by young charismatic traffickers who pretend to be a romantic partner to gain their confidence in coercing them into a commercial sex act. And once recruited, traffickers frequently use violence, intimidation, drug addiction, psychological manipulation to trap the victims into continued sexual exploitation. Victims are commonly advertised online, transported to hotels, motels, and residences that they meet their sex purchasers, also known as John. The customers, the dates, the tricks, the clients. The victims often receive little to no financial proceeds, despite promises to the contrary by the traffickers, and they frequently face physical and sexual assault by their trafficker, including the buyers. Traffickers are more likely than other perpetrators of child sexual exploitation to have documented criminal histories, often for violent offenses. And yet, because traffickers are often subject to their victims to extreme coercion and emotional abuse, well, child sex trafficking victims often retain a sense of loyalty to their traffickers, and they may not see themselves as a victim. They have a trauma bond, and it has long, complex effects on them. These complicated trauma-related effects, coping mechanics can hinder a delay from medical providers and other people trying to help them. They hinder the encounter with the victim and see signs of their trafficking, such as public transportation, staff, cars, taxi drivers, and hotel managers. Such professionals often miss signs of sex trafficking when the victim is a child of color or a male, due to the implicit basis in our society and the adultification of children of color and female. Everybody thinks that this is just 90% female, 90% children of color. This is about everybody. Human traffickers include perpetrators directly involved in trafficking, such as recruiters, enforcers, facilitators, buyers, customers, advertisers, and an individual who benefit from the exploitation of these kids. It starts out as a kid, and then the kid, once it grows up in this, more likely than not, goes into the same job as the person who recruited them. So it is a never-ending cycle. But most offenders are male. Most offenders are male. But the facilitators of child sex trafficking are not otherwise a homogeneous group. Some are charismatic, some are referred to in the commercial sex industry as finesse, Romeo pimps. They kill you with kindness till they take you to hell. While others are aggressive, sometimes referred in the commercial sex industry as a racist, problematic. Terms like gorilla or gorilla pimps. Charismatic traffickers tend to be socially skilled, manipulative, and charming. They appeal to the emotional needs of the victim and often use a ruse of romantic relationship coupled with empty promises and a recruiting tactic. Victims of charismatic offenders believe that they're in a romantic relationship with the offender. They do not see themselves as victims and thus are likely to cooperate in a criminal investigation, while charismatic offenders prefer to use manipulation to ensure compliance with their demands. They may resort to threats, and acts of violence to control their victims when necessary. A trafficker once said, "I look for girls who are willing to travel and who are running away from something or someone." Hmm. There are two types of offenders, and they fall along a continuum rather than distract um, categories where an offender fits into either one box or the other. Facilitators vary their methodologies based on past success, the vulnerabilities of victims, their relationships, the history with the victim, and techniques learned from observing other traffickers. See, because sex trafficking is generally not a crime of opportunity, but rather requires some organization. Offenders must house and control their victims, direct and oversee the exploitation on the street or in a hotel or via the internet, or manage the proceeds from the activity, all without attracting the attention of law enforcement. While some offenders may intuitively skilled in this regard, others are mentored by other sex traffickers. They are trained how to locate, recruit, control victims, and they learn the best practices by engaging in related criminal acts. For some, these skills are passed down. Well, I plan on breaking this up into several sections because I don't want to overload people with a bunch of statistics, and this does have a lot of statistics involved in it. But the most important point is that everybody needs to become a part of putting a stop to this. It's about calculation. It's about manipulation. It's about violence. It's about a cluster of personality traits and behaviors that include, among others, superficial charm, manipulation, parasitic lifestyles, and a lack of empathy. Because most of the time, at the end of the day, some of them are sociopaths in a strange way, with a history of sexual violence, represented in a sexual danger way upon society. And it releases them into society because they lack a conscience and they act without empathy. These characteristics usually result in a rapid return to the street. There are many reasons why children get into this horrible world, either by running away. And the sad part about it is, those kids think that whatever's out in the world, even in the dark, is not as bad as what is at home. Think of how bad they believe their home life must be when they don't fear going out into the streets where they know no one and cannot turn to anyone that they take themselves out into the world in the dark to face demons they don't even know about, which is how they become tied into this. Someone offers them a fake safe place. But it's us. It's us who need to pay attention more. It's us who need to report what we see, even if we think we're wrong. If we're wrong, okay, sorry. But if we're not wrong, then it matters. There's millions and millions and millions upon millions of children, young adults in America. I'm not talking about the world, Ethan. I'm talking about America. That kids are out there, young and teenage and whatever, alone, hungry, scared, out there turning tricks just to survive. And when they get older, they're the one who stands on the corners. Typically, they're the young men and the young women who stand on the corners to give you love for a long time. There is a whole cycle. The list isn't, oh, she's a hooker, he's a hooker, he's a young lady boy, just out of nowhere. It's just sad. This is a big subject. It always has been, and it always will be. But we're going to keep talking about it until it changes. We're going to keep talking about it. Even if it just changes one or two. I'm going to change myself. It's up to you to change yourself. I'll see you next time on the next chapter of Hidden in Plain Sight. Y'all have a great night. Please be careful. Stay with a buddy. Guys, stay with a buddy. Ladies, stay with a buddy. I can't express that enough. Y'all have a happy new year. And good night.